And we are recording. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Merle Massey. I am the coordinator for undergraduate research here at the University of Saskatchewan. Welcome to Comprehensive Searching for Your Literature Review. This is presented by Susan Murphy, who's a health sciences librarian at the University of Saskatchewan, has given similar presentations before and is a guru and will give you some great tips and pointers on how to do a really good comprehensive search. With COVID, of course, most of the faculty have let us know that they are going, instead of sending you off into a lab or out into the field, most students this summer are going to be conducting a very comprehensive literature search, much more in depth than what you've probably done in the past. And so we wanted to find ways to support that and support our university students across the board. And with that, I will pass all of this over to Susan Murphy.
Great. Thank you very much, Merle, and thank you for agreeing to be my kind of behind-the-scenes tech support for this session. And thank you to Angie for monitoring the chat on my behalf. It takes a team to make it work, and this is a wonderful team to work with. So good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. As Merle said, my name is Susan Murphy. I'm one of the health sciences librarians here at the university. I am the liaison to veterinary medicine and toxicology. So if there's any of you folks out there, hopefully you will recognize me or at least recognize my voice. So we'll be talking a little bit about comprehensive searching. And if you do have questions, absolutely put them into the chat. As Merle said, Angie will be monitoring and she'll answer the questions she can, or if there are some that she thinks are particularly relevant and timely, she'll flag them and we can have a little conversation about them during this session. But I'll get things started because this is going to be an action-packed session, lots of things for you to learn, and we'll move forward. Why am I not moving? Oh, there we go. So just a quick overview of what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about designing a good search strategy. How do you go about doing that? You'll also come away from this session knowing the best places to search for information, a little bit of information on how you save your searches, and a little bit on finding information on managing your citations. And there will be further information on some of these topics in some of the subsequent workshops as well. So we'll move forward. Just wanted to give you a little overview of what the steps are in literature review. And I'm talking mostly about comprehensive literature reviews. Sometimes people get a little confused when they talk about a systematic review versus systematically searching the literature. And they are two very different things. So if you are talking about a systematic review and you're needing to work on that, we do have a toolkit that's available to you through the library. You might be best to contact your liaison librarian, and I'll be talking a little bit later about how you go about doing that. But the focus today is going to be primarily on the first 4 steps in how you conduct a literature review. So formulating your question, developing your search strategy, identifying where best to search, and conducting and refining the search. The other 2 points will be covered in other workshops. So we'll move forward from here. Developing that search strategy. What you want to do, it's often the toughest thing is refining your research question. What are you going to research? And you need to give that some thought. And I know that I'm talking to probably a broad spectrum of subject areas here. So I'm trying to keep the information I'm sharing with you a little more generic so that you can apply it no matter which discipline you're doing your research in. But I just thought I would mention, for the benefit of certainly the science and health sciences people, the PICO model is one that's fairly commonly used to help you define what it is you're going to research. And the PICO stands for Problem, Intervention, Comparison, and Outcome. So that's a little bit of a framework that you might want to use to help you identify how you want to refine your research question. You also want to be able to, once you identify your key terms, phrases, words, etc., you want to keep a record of those. Write them down, because quite often you're in a search or you're not sure if you've done this, used this term before in your search. So it's really important to keep that list of all the terms that you're using and do some brainstorming to create a concept map or a mind map to kind of identify those themes and keywords as well. So there's lots of pre-thinking that has to happen before you start actually looking for the information. Go forward. My forward button seems to be a little bit lagging today. Identifying those synonyms for your keywords. It's often more than just looking at the terms that are in your research question. And you need to go beyond just using those terms. Are there any other ways that these terms can be represented? Are there different synonyms? Are there abbreviations? Are there different concepts that mean the same thing? You need to really think outside the box for some of this. I had a situation years ago with a nutrition student where we were going at the problem from one direction and not finding anything. And we flipped it around and the literature just opened up to us. So sometimes you have to think outside the box when you're looking for your synonyms and the way you want to approach your searching. You also need to think about what type of material, time frame, things like that you want to include and why. So you may want just peer-reviewed articles. You may want to go more broadly and include books, book chapters, gray literature, things of that nature. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Does a time frame, is that important to you? Are you looking at the literature for the last 5 years, 10 years? Are you looking at a particular time frame of the literature? If you're doing some historical research, for example, it might just be things published within a certain time frame in the 1930s to 50s or things of that nature. So you want to make sure you have all those little details firmly in place before you start doing your searching. One of the things that we like to share with students is this little map that's showing on your screen now. It helps you identify and write down your different concepts that you're working with. Across the board, across the top, you see the red ands, and those are your concepts that you want to make sure you have in each of your searches. The ors going down the side, those are where your synonyms would be. So it just helps you lay things out a little more comprehensively so that it makes a little more sense to you. And I'm going to be talking in a little more detail about this in a few minutes. So don't be afraid to use that particular concepts framework to help you identify your concepts and your synonyms. So some pictures on the screen for you. And you might be wondering, why are you showing us this? Why are you showing us information about George Boole? And these were photos I took when I was in Ireland last summer. We were at the University College of Cork. And this is just a little bit of librarian nerdness for you, a little bit of library trivia. But I thought I'd share it with you just to spice up your morning a little bit. George Boole. Why am I showing you information about George Boole? Does anyone know? If you want to type it into the chat box. Angie, have there been any answers to that? There we go. I'm seeing some of the chat. Exactly. Boolean algebra, the father of Boolean logic. Awesome. I'm actually seeing a few of the chats pop up on my screen, which is great. Yes. And I just thought, this is so cool when I saw this, that I'm going to put this into my instruction classes. So there you have it, the benefit of my nerdness. Okay. So combining your concept with Boolean operators, that's a really important thing to make sure you have, that make sure you firmly understand how this works, because that's the first step where your searching is going to go awry if you don't have your Boolean operators sorted out. So your and, your ors, and your nots. Those are the three that are most commonly used. We generally recommend to not use the not. It's a bit of a tricky one, and it does run the danger of excluding some information that might be of value to you. So we tend to say primarily use the ands and the ors. And the ors will expand your results, and the ands will narrow your results. And on the next slide, I have a little bit of a poll. Now, unfortunately, I just discovered this morning that Poll Everywhere did not load properly on my computer at home. But I'm hoping that through the chat box, you can identify which of these categories, and you can answer more than one number. How many of you, A, wear glasses. So if you want to just put your hands up or just put A in, we'll get a sense of that. Okay, so we're getting quite a few that wear glasses. That's great. Moving on to the next one. Do you wear glasses or are you left-handed? Seeing a lot more responses to that one. So we've expanded our options by adding 2 options here. It's expanded our results. Now with the third option, oh, I missed a word here. I wear glasses and I'm left-handed. So those that wear glasses and are also left-handed. Not too many I'm seeing. So you see what happens when you use that and? Automatically your pool of results becomes much, much smaller. So hopefully, and Boolean is something we use in everyday life. We do, we just don't realize that's what we're doing. If you're going out buying an item of clothing, do you want buttons or zippers? Does it have to be red or can it also be blue? Do you want a hood and a zipper on your coat? So you're automatically broadening or narrowing your choices. And that's what you need to do in the databases as well. So we'll move on to the next. Talk a little bit about the types of databases, because the databases are where you're going to want to be going to find your peer-reviewed journal articles. And there are really 2 different types that I want to talk about today. One is the keyword database, and that will typically search the title, abstract, author, etc., and sometimes the full text of the source. You need to be mindful that sometimes language will vary with databases, and that's why it's important to have those synonyms at the ready. And I've just given you some examples of some that we have available to you through the library that you might want to search. And I just have a little asterisk by Google Scholar. I've included it. It's not really a database, it's more of a search, but it's certainly a valid source for you to be searching through a keyword search. Now, some of you might be wondering about USearch. You probably have used it quite a bit in your undergraduate studies. Primarily, I would think in your first and second year. I would say for the type of research you're doing this summer, you probably want to pretty much stay away from USearch. Mostly it's used if you don't know anything about a topic. You can go into USearch and find a few articles that might help give you some context for your topic. Or if you just need to find a couple of articles, you're writing a short undergraduate paper, you don't need to be doing a comprehensive search, you just need to use, your prof has just said, using 3 journal articles, write a paper on them. So you just find 3 that you think are good enough for your needs, and that's what we call satisficing. So that would be my recommendation is, for the most part, you probably don't want to be using USearch. What you want to be doing is looking for the databases that are specific and primary to your particular subject area or to your topic. And I'll be talking in a few minutes about how you go about identifying those. The other type of databases are things that have databases that have a thesaurus or a controlled vocabulary. So every item in the database is assigned subject headings. They've decided that we're going to call it this or that. So the synonyms or similar concepts are mapped to that particular subject heading. And I've just given you some examples: APA PsycInfo, ABI Inform, Web of Science, Medicine, Medline, Global Health. Those are databases that have a controlled vocabulary or a thesaurus. So another example I like to use in my in-person classes, and I think we can do it fairly effectively here, is looking at that image on the screen. What could you call that? And if you just wanted to put your answers into the chat box, we'll see what we come up with. Phone, cell phone, mobile phone, all kinds, smartphone, absolutely. So the list is getting longer and longer. And this is where a thesaurus and controlled vocabulary is really powerful and important, is rather than having to type all of those terms in, no matter which one you typed into a database that has a controlled vocabulary, it would say, if you type in phone, and the database uses the term cell phone, it would redirect you to the term cell phone, and it would pick up all variations of that: smartphone, iPhone, handheld device, whatever the case may be. So you don't have to think as hard about what your synonyms are. So it helps you along with that. So that makes it a lot easier, because then you get a much more comprehensive search by using that thesaurus or controlled vocabulary. Any questions at this point about anything I've been talking about? I'll just pause for a moment. I'm not hearing any, so we'll carry on. So I had said I would talk with you a little bit about how do you find out which databases are the most relevant for you. We have developed a number of library research guides which will help you with this process. Every discipline taught on campus has a research guide, and I've just shown you on the screen from the library's webpage. If you go under that Get Help button and go down to Research Guides, you'll see a list of the different disciplines on the campus. You just choose that research guide. There will be tabs on that guide that'll tell you how to find journal articles or find articles, and it'll give you a list of the databases with little descriptions of them, and identify in many cases which ones are the best ones to be using, and what are some other ones that you could be using depending on what your needs are. So that's the easiest way to find that information. If you're really stuck, and I know that a lot of students do research, or a lot of people do research in kind of multidisciplinary topics where you may need to use a sociology database and an anthropology database and maybe a public health database, and you're not quite sure because you're a sociology student and you're not as familiar with the literature in those other areas. Certainly you can always contact the librarian for your subject area for some advice on what other databases might be useful. And I've included the link to the page on the library's website where you can find out who your subject librarian is. And certainly be aware that we're all online during these COVID times. We're all available to help you, whether it's one-on-one or small group. We can do telephone calls, we can do WebExes, we can do email, whatever you're most comfortable with, depending on what your technology allows for. So don't be shy about contacting your subject librarian if you have any kind of questions with your research this summer. Okay, so a few tips and tricks I want to go over with you. You've identified all your keywords, all your synonyms, you're ready to go, concepts are in place. There's some things you need to think about as well, is things like, do I need to truncate any of these words? Shorten them up so that you can pick up the singulars or the plurals or different endings of words. And sometimes there's a question mark or an asterisk that you put after the shortened form of the word, so that it'll pick up those different endings. And the database will tell you, the help screens on the database will tell you what they use for shortening. Some databases don't use anything. You just type in the trunk of the word and it picks up all the endings. Things like phrase searching. If you have a multi-word phrase that you want to make sure that you're searching for, rather than just two kind of random keywords, you can put quotation marks around the phrase, and that will make sure that the database, when you're searching a keyword database, that'll make sure the database searches that as a phrase. Be mindful of alternate spellings as well. You just want to be aware, again, mostly if you're working in a keyword database, that you may need to spell the word a variety of ways in order to pick up all of the references to it. So there may be some literature coming out of England, for example, that has a different spelling, or American spellings versus the Canadian spellings. So you just want to be mindful of that. I've talked a little bit about synonyms and how important they are, and thinking out of the box when you're trying to find your terms. There's also some adjacency features that you can use. So if you want one word within so many words of another word, I've just shown you it could be a W/3 if you want it within 3 words of something, ADJ3, so that, again, it helps pull those keywords together with a little better context. And again, the help screens on the databases or your subject librarian can certainly help you with that kind of a search. Limits are also an important feature that are offered by most databases. The one that I want you to be really careful about clicking on is quite often there's a full text limit that's available to you. And you might think, oh, this is great. I can just narrow it down to all the full text that's available to me. Well, unfortunately, that's a little bit of a misnomer. With respect to the full text limit option, what it's doing is limiting you to the full text that the provider of the database is allowing you to have access to. So database vendors often provide some of their own full text content, and then they allow us in the library to provide links through those yellow Find It buttons to full text content that we subscribe to. So if you click that full text limit button, you're not necessarily going to be picking up the content that the library is making available to you full text. So I would recommend not using that limit. One of the things, I have it in red because this is something that catches me every time, is if I get a 0 result, I always need to go back and check my spelling and my typing. I'm the world's worst typist. And that could be your first problem when you come up with a 0 result. You've just typed something a little bit incorrectly. And especially if you're dealing with terminology you're not as familiar with, make sure that your typing is accurate, because that can really throw your search off. You will on occasion, less so now, but you will on occasion find reference to journal articles, book chapters, all kinds of publications that we don't have available in the library. We are still offering an interlibrary loan service through these COVID times. We will not be able to get you physical items, but we will do our best to get you scanned copies of chapters or journal articles, either from our own collections, our physical collections. Once we are able to get in and access those collections, which we're hoping can happen by the fall, but other libraries as well have content that we don't have available, so we can get those electronic resources for you from those libraries. So don't be afraid about using interlibrary loans. The functionality is still there, but just know that you will get an electronic copy. It won't be a full book, but it would be a chapter of a book, up to 10% of the book as per our copyright legislation in Canada. So that's an option for you as well. Quite often people disregard things because they're not available handily in our collection. But the kind of research you'll be doing this summer, I think the expectation will be is that you submit those interlibrary loans for things that we don't have available through our library. Just wanted to show you this COVID-19 search strategy just to give you kind of a really extreme example of what some keyword searching like. So if you look through this, you can see a wide variety of synonyms that are being used for COVID-19. There's COVID-19, COVID-19, COVID-2019, COVID-2019, SARS-CoV-2, etc., SARS coronavirus 2, etc., etc. Wuhan, Hubei, still in there. Coronavirus, you can see down towards the bottom, has an asterisk after it. So that's truncating that to see if there's any other endings of it, etc., etc., including 2019, including 2020. Pandemic is a term that's being used, epidemic. Coronavirus at the very bottom, it's coronavirus as one word, truncated, or coronavirus as two words with the word virus truncated to pick up viruses, things like that. So this is not necessarily an expectation of you. I just wanted to show you how complex and how diverse your searching could end up being, and the kinds of things that you want to think about when you're searching. The items, the TIAB and things like that are in brackets. Those are limiting that search to the title and abstract field only, which is something that can be done as well in a keyword search. So just an example, again, for me, this is really exciting. Maybe not so much for you, but we'll just carry on. Some additional useful strategies I just want to talk about that are a little more generalized. Absolutely, you want to search more than one database. We don't have any databases, and I don't think they exist out there, that cover absolutely 100% of all of the literature. There are overlaps in the literature that the databases do, index, but there will be differences as well. So you do want to make sure you're using more than one database when you're doing your searching. I would recommend searching both control vocabulary and keywords. Got a question here that Angie's going to ask Merle. If you're in a control vocabulary database, I encourage you to also use your keywords. It's just a double check way of making sure that you've absolutely caught all of the literature. So it's just a nice double check there. We also recommend that you search one term at a time. Now, the example I just showed you with the COVID-19 shows a lot of search terms all in one big string, and that's for the higher end, more experienced user. We recommend you search one term at a time, and I know that sounds a little bit tedious, but what it allows you to do is it gives you the flexibility to mix and match your terms. So results from your search number 1, you could match them with results from search, term number 6. You could combine 1 through 6. But what it does is it helps you know if one of your terms is just not working for you, and then you can take it off your list of this term was netting me no results. So it shows you, can help you find out where your search might be failing. If you did a big comprehensive search like the one I just showed you and ended up with 0 results, you wouldn't necessarily know why. So doing the searching one term at a time will help you, give you a little more flexibility in how you end up with the results you end up. One of the features that we've certainly started seeing in a lot of our databases is very much like the Amazon searching. If you like this, you might also like that. They often give you a related documents or a similar documents option, quite often on the right-hand side of the screen. And I would have a look at those as well, especially if you're really having trouble finding information. But the databases are trying to be helpful and say, oh, well, if you like this article, if you thought that was useful, here's some other ones that you might find of use as well. So just some different strategies to use. Refining your search. So you want to look at your results. Did you get what you thought you were going to get? Did you get more? Did you get less? Questions you need to ask yourself. A good quality search, it's hard to know. It's hard to pin a number on that. It's very dependent on how comprehensively you're searching, broadly you're searching, what terminology you're using. But certainly ask yourself that question. I think I was going to get lots of information. And when you think of something like COVID-19, again, using that as an example, a few months ago, if you tried to search that in a database, you probably wouldn't find very much. Now you're probably going to find a lot more. So things to keep in mind. So very current issues, current topics, you might not find as much information, especially in peer-reviewed journals, because it takes time for those peer-reviewed journals to get written, to get published, and to get indexed in the databases. So again, those are touch points where if you're not sure, you might want to talk to your subject librarian and say, I thought I'd get more. Is there some way I can maybe fix my search, adjust my search a little bit so that I can find everything a little bit more? Looking at your article abstract, your author keywords might give you some ideas as to other keywords you might want to add to your search, and then you need to go back and refine your search. So searching is really an iterative process. You look at your results, you make some adjustments, you go back and search again. You look at those results, you might need to make some further adjustments. You go back and run your search again. I don't think anybody does the perfect search first time out. Okay, so just some things to keep in mind. Now, if you're really struggling and you're just not finding anything, or you've only found 2 or 3 articles on your topic, here's some additional techniques that you can use that can help you find further information. And we refer to this as snowballing. Not something we want to be thinking about in May of any year. Snowballs, hopefully we've left all that behind us. But look at the bibliographies in the articles that you found, because that will tell you what articles and what resources that those authors used, or that author used to write their paper. It will be older information, but it may be that the key information is a little bit older. So it's a way of finding some additional resources. You can also see if the most relevant articles have been cited in other articles. This only works if the article is a little bit older. So if an article was written in January of this year, quite likely it's not been cited by anybody yet. It does take some time, but it is a good way of seeing newer information on an article that you found and how that's been used in somebody else's work. So looking backwards, looking forwards. And then the other thing you can do is search for the names of some of the authors that you've been finding and see what else they've written. So if they are a specialist in a certain area, you can look at the other works that they've written as well, and you might find some information in those articles that are relevant to your topic. So just some ways of really scouring the literature and making sure that you've found everything you can possibly find, especially if you're really having trouble finding information. Any questions on any of this so far? I know it's a lot of information and a lot of detail to be throwing at you on a Friday morning. Advice for when you might find more. If you find more information than you expect, then you want to go back and look at or have a look at the information you're finding. You may need to refine your search a little bit more. Maybe what you're finding is too broad, so you might want to narrow your search a little bit. And that's a good opportunity for you to connect with your subject librarian and say, this is what I'm searching for, this is what I'm finding. Some of these questions are flashing fairly quickly. You know, is there some way, how might you suggest I refine my search? Because I'm finding too much information. Also, if you're finding too much information, you might want to think about time periods. Do you maybe just want to look at the most recent 5 years worth of information, depending on what your research needs are? So there's a lot of different techniques that can help you. Maybe some of the terms you're using are a little broader, and you may want to just focus on the really, really specific terms. So those are choices and decisions that you have to make when you look at your results. I saw something quickly about someone having 2 windows open, searching Google and Google Scholar and things of that nature. Whatever techniques work, be aware that when you search Google Scholar, you want to make sure you're going through the library's website to do that, rather than just going out to Google to do that. Because if you go through the library's website, you can narrow things down to what we have available locally in our library as well. Okay. Just going to move on. There is another area of literature searching, and I just have to check my time. I've got lots of time, so we can probably handle a few questions afterwards. Gray literature searching. This is another place you might want to look depending on what your topic is and how current your information needs to be and how much trouble you're finding in finding peer-reviewed journal articles in more traditional literature. So gray literature is very much non-traditional. It's generally not peer-reviewed. It's things that may never really be formally published. It's not as easily available. Having Google out there is making things more easily available. There's not really any control over the information, but it might be the only source of information for particular research questions. And again, I go back to the COVID example. In the early days, when COVID was just starting to become more of an issue, the gray literature is likely the only place you'll be finding a lot of information about the current situation with COVID. There just wasn't time to get those peer-reviewed articles, get the research done, get peer-reviewed articles written, published, and available through more traditional peer-reviewed journal streams. So a lot of the information out there might have been found in less traditional places, and you have to take it with a bit more of a grain of salt. Be aware that there's not a lot of control over it. So here's some additional sources: government reports, publications, conference proceedings, data sets, theses, think tank publications, position papers and guidelines from organizations and such. Those things generally are not covered in a more traditional article database source. And I've also provided for you a list of new sources that are coming out as acceptable sources of gray literature. So blogs, PowerPoint presentations, people are putting their PowerPoint presentations out on the web now, pamphlets, fact sheets, but you can get a sense of how I don't want to say sketchy, but how uncontrolled some of these might be. They're written, but there's not that same rigor of review that you're going to find in the peer-reviewed journal article. But they may well be the only source of information for what you're looking for. So that's just something to be aware of. And for the most part, it's a search you're looking at. So I like to say, usually with a smile on my face, that's one of the times that searching Google is totally acceptable. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about evaluating sources, because I was just talking about the gray literature, and it needs a bit more evaluation than a normal peer-reviewed journal article. But there are a lot of different ways that you can evaluate sources, but one that's kind of a quick and easy way is what we call the CRAP test. So currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So when you're looking at currency, is the information timely to what your topic is? Relevance, is it actually relevant? Is it important to what your information needs are? Or is it a little more off to the left field? Authority, who is providing the information? What are the author's credentials? You might want to question information you find on a particular topic if the author, the person writing it, if there's no information about who they are, or if their credentials are quite different from the subject area that you're doing your research in. Accuracy, is it reliable, correct? Is it truthful? What you often want to be watching for is looking for consistency of information across the resources you're finding. So if somebody is saying, this is what I found in my research, and the next person is saying something similar, and the next person is saying something similar, and then the fourth person is saying something quite different, then you want to be able to think about that and say, is this actually accurate information that the person is presenting, the fourth person is presenting? Everyone else is thinking their findings are quite different. So you want to think about how accurate the information is. Statistics are something that are always a challenge in that area. You want to make sure they're coming from reliable sources rather than just some random person making some statistical guesses about things. And the purpose. Why is this information being provided? Again, is it just somebody chit-chatting on a blog, or is it somebody who is actually sharing information for a serious reason? So that's why I'm saying examine those Google results a little more carefully. Be a little more skeptical about what you find on Google because they're not going to necessarily be the same quality, go through the same rigor of review that you would find in a peer-reviewed or scholarly article. I just want to mention as well predatory publishers and journals. And I've given you a link to a guide we've prepared so that you can understand more about predatory publishers. But there are journals out there that are quite unscrupulous, and they have a quick turnaround time for publication. Quite often you get notices via email saying, oh, we really liked your article on this. We'd like you to write something on that for this journal. And you think, oh, gee, somebody wants my content. But you find out that that journal is actually not of good quality. There's not really appropriate peer review, and the information that is being published is not given the same kind of rigor that you would get from a regular peer-reviewed journal. So including that kind of information in your research is quite problematic. You don't want to end up with any predatory journals and predatory journal publishers on your reference list. So have a look at that predatory publishers guide and get a sense of what you might want to be watching for. Things like typos, grammar issues, and things that you're reading are kind of some first and easy clues that maybe there are some problems with the integrity of the information in that particular journal article or that resource. So you've found all your information, you've set up a good search strategy, you've got a nice question, a good solid research question, you've done your database searching using a lot of the techniques that I talked about, keywords, control vocabulary, limiting your search, truncating, phrase searching, things of that nature. You've scoured the bibliographies, you've looked for citations, you've done everything, and that's great. I had mentioned very early on that you want to make sure you're documenting the strategies and the keywords that you're using. And the nice thing about most databases is that you can usually create an account in them within the database itself, so you can save your search strategies. And that's really important because we've got a lot going on in our minds, and it's very easy to forget. What search terms did I use to find this great result? So this is an option within the databases themselves that allow you to save that. And then the other nice feature is that you can just rerun that search very easily. So you can update your search quite quickly. So if you are doing it, in your case, because you're doing summer research, it's probably not as essential, but something to think about in the future, especially if you're doing graduate studies, is that you will want to rerun your search strategies fairly close to the time that you're ready to finish off your thesis or dissertation to make sure that you're catching the most current literature. Okay? And it also allows you what you want to do once you have your searches, your strategies, is I want to talk a little bit about how you export this information into a bibliographic citation manager. So you've saved your search strategy, you've saved your searches. What you want to do is you want to put them into a reference citation manager. Okay, so you've gone through your list of, you found, 70 articles, you've gone through, you've looked at the ones that you want to keep, you think are relevant. What you want to do is put them into a citation manager. And again, I've got some links on the screen as to where you would find a list of the managers that we have available to you. Things like EndNote, Zotero, Mendeley. There are free versions of those, which are great. Again, if you go under that Get Help, Research Guides, there's a General Topics category that takes you to Citation Style Guides, and there's a section there on managing your references. So you can take the resources, the references that you found, and you can bring them into, you can export them into, say, EndNote. And then when you're ready to write your final paper or your final report, you can create a nice bibliography in whatever style is needed using EndNote, Zotero, or Mendeley. Within these citation managers, there's also options, because you'll be importing from a number of different databases. There are options usually to dedupe, so you can get rid of duplicate references so that you don't have all of these things cluttering up your list of references. But it is just a really, really nice way to keep all your information in a nice, tidy package and be able to provide different output no matter what the citation style is. Because depending on what you want to do with your information, if you were doing this for a paper that you're planning on publishing, the style that the journal article might want might be a certain way. Whereas if you were rejected from that journal, you submitted to another journal, their style might be quite different. So it allows you that flexibility to put your reference list in whatever citation style is wanted. And I know this is something that we all kind of think about as librarians, and you'll think about as researchers too, is why can't everyone just use the same citation style? Like, good grief, there's thousands of them out there. But it is what it is, and these are just resources that you can use to help you manage that a lot more easily. Okay, so I don't want to go into that in any great detail. We do offer through the course of the year sessions on using each of these citation management tools. So if that's something that you want a little more information on, you can certainly, as I say, there is the guide as well, but there are some workshops that will be offered in the fall again to help you use these. And again, this is something you can talk to your liaison librarian about. If you're in one of these management tools and you're having some problems, just give your librarian a quick email, and they can help you sort things out as well. So where are we at with our time? We've got about 15 minutes left. As I say, the librarian for your subject area, absolutely excellent resource. Any questions that you have about anything that I talked about today, they can certainly provide you with more detail, provide you with some additional information if you need it, and give you some specific guidance for the particular databases you might want to be using. As I'm sure you can appreciate, there just wasn't time today for me to look at any one of the databases in any kind of detail because you're all from a diverse range of subject areas. So I really wouldn't know which one to pick anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here, and maybe Angie, if there are some questions, we can deal with some of them now.
Thanks, Susan. Actually, I don't think there was any questions that we didn't address in the chat box, unless I didn't catch any. But I do encourage people to put any questions they have. Oh, just wait here. Did I miss one?
There was someone that asked if there was time for their
Savannah, please, if you have a question, yes, we definitely have time. So I'm not sure if you want to, if you could just.
I unmuted Savannah.
Oh,
I've unmuted you, so go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great, thanks. I have a question about, I think it was the adjacency use when you're searching up your keywords.
Yes.
With the W/3. It's a simple question, but I'm curious what that would actually look like when you were searching. So say your research topic was on photosynthesis. Would you just write in photosynthesis W/3?
And then whatever your next term would be. So if you wanted photosynthesis within 3 words of a particular plant, for example.
I see.
Yeah, so that it's not just randomly picking out those 2 keywords within, 20 words of each other and there's no real relevance.
Great, that's super helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Savannah. Great question.
Susan, we also have another question from Chantel. Do you see it there?
I don't.
Okay. Do you have any tips regarding how to assess a journal's validity as a source besides its impact factor?
Well, I think if you look at that predatory publishers guide, that will also tell you whether that journal is legitimate or not, because sometimes journals will say, we have this wonderful impact factor, a really good solid impact factor. I wouldn't necessarily alone use that as a judge of quality. I would make sure that you're not dealing with a predatory journal as well. And Angie, I'm certainly open to any other comments you have on this as well.
For sure. I think
it's more in the social sciences area, so it's nice that we've kind of got this bit of a balance here.
For sure. I think it's also to seeing who's publishing in the journals. And so if you're finding that as you delve into a specific topic and you're seeing specific journals that are being referenced by other experts in the field, I think that is a good indication that people do see it as a legitimate place to publish. Also, too, I find that, again, talking to your supervisor in terms of, what are those core sources that I should be looking at? It's not to say that faculty members aren't getting necessarily duped, for lack of a better word, but they have a very kind of specific focus, and so they'll know what are those core sources to be looking at. And honestly, just a good old Google search in terms of finding out what other people are saying about a journal. I think it's similar to when you're buying something online and you're like, this seems like a sketchy online shop, and then you do a Google search and you find that people have such poor reviews. So I think that's just another quick and easy way of seeing what people have to say about a specific journal. Are there any other questions?
If not, then I just want to say thank you very much to Susan Murphy and to Andy Gerard for handling all the background work, and thank you all for coming. We will be putting this online just for those who who weren't able to be here with us this morning. And if you want to go back and watch it again, if there's something that Susan said that you are like, oh, how did she explain that? Go ahead, you'll be able to watch it again. And I'll have those online hopefully within the next 24 to 48 working days. Thanks everyone for coming. And Susan and Angie, thanks so much for being here. Take care, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thank you all. Bye.
I love all the thank yous coming in on the chats. You're all such good
Great.
Canadian kids. Saying thank you. You're the best. Okay, talk to everyone later.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Thanks.
Bye.